now. And welcome back to Sensical Politics, where common sense meets politics. I'm your host, Spencer Sembrat. Joining me tonight
is Jeremy Holt.
And Tyler McDonald.
And tonight we have a couple things we wanted to discuss. Just yesterday, we're going to talk about the Supreme Court's ruling, I guess you could say, siding with the cake baker who said that he will refuse to bake a gay wedding cake or a wedding cake for a gay couple. We're also going to talk about a gay wedding cake. We're also going to talk about Medicare, how it's out of money, basically, or it's projected to be out of money within 10 years. We're going to talk about whether Trump or the president in general can pardon himself and why Trump would even be discussing this. We're going to talk about Kim Kardashian's visit to the White House to talk about prison reform. And we're also going to talk about just this morning, Trump disinvited the Super Bowl champions of last year, the Eagles, to the White House because they disrespected him. So the first thing is the Supreme Court case. Here, I'll share the article right now. So in a narrow decision, writes the New York Times, Supreme Court sides with Baker, who turned away gay couple. So they essentially said that the state of, what was this?
Colorado.
Of Colorado, yeah, was too aggressive and had no bounds to essentially sue this caker because he does have his rights protected by the First Amendment. And so we're just going to talk about kind of how that's a win for the First Amendment and why it had to go all the way to the Supreme Court, because keep in mind it had to pass through all of the states courts and they could never reach a decision, even though I would argue.
Well, they did reach a decision.
Under freedom of religion. So we'll just start with Jeremy. Jeremy, what's your take on this?
Well, as you said, New York Times assesses this as a narrow ruling. Not necessarily narrow as in it was like 5-4 justices ruling in favor, because it was a 7-2.
Right, so it's not really narrow in that sense.
It's not narrow in that sense. It's narrow in the sense of its application. It only really applies in this particular instance and does not have much of an effect legally. Wider, sort of how other cases are that we expect. Roe v. Wade says all abortion is legal in some sense. This doesn't say that all people are able to use freedom of religion to do this sort of thing, disallowing a service based on their religious beliefs. But that does not mean that still is not the case, because this certainly will make it so that way people aren't encouraged to do this sort of thing. They won't be encouraged to try and get services out of people that they can't get.
Yeah. Well, so, Tyler, would you say that it's kind of like a consequence of being free to discriminate? Like, if I have my business and I don't want to sell my product to you because I hate people that wear glasses, is that just a consequence of you living in a free society, or is that discrimination and does that infringe upon you?
Well, I mean, the general public, from my analysis, at least from the people who I've talked to and just reading online editorials about it, generally say that as a business owner, one should legally should not be allowed to discriminate. Personally, I don't agree with that. I think that it's my property, it's my liberty as the business owner to be able to serve and refuse to serve whoever comes into my establishment. But like I said, I don't think that's a very agreed upon opinion. Like I do, like for example, the 1964 Civil Rights Act. That meant that most established businesses cannot discriminate against people for a set of different characteristics. And so when it comes to it very important in my mind that you have to specify whether you're talking legally, right? Currently in the United States, should a business owner legally be allowed to discriminate? Well, no, because the law forbids it, right? So legally, no, he should not be able to. And that's like the same concept behind should income tax exist. Well, legally, right now it should, because it like legally, let me rephrase that. Legally, can states tax you for the variety of things that are listed under the Constitution or things like that? Legally, yes. Idealistically, again, it's important to make that distinction. No, I don't think they should be able to. And so that's sort of a just something that I've noticed when discussing this with people, where they'll just bring up the fact, they'll be like, "Oh, the 1964 Civil Rights Act," and I'll say, "Okay, yes, but that's legally." But I mean, there are tons of things that were legal at one point, and we decided to make them illegal. So clearly, that's one of the reasons why I prefer to argue morally, or like morally and both idealistically, because I feel like it's more grounded. You can't just say, well, the law, okay, but if you're not a judge, you can't just say the law says this, therefore it is right. It's more, at least sort of in my opinion, it's more important to talk about should the laws be like that than what the laws are. Right. But that's just me.
Yeah, no, I would agree. Well, what would you say, Jeremy, to someone that says, well, whenever you start selling to the public, you have to serve everyone just because?
Well, that's certainly...
if you don't want to serve a certain group of people, then don't serve anyone at all.
That's certainly something that isn't addressed in the Civil Rights Bill that Tyler is talking about, and what everyone talks about, the Civil Rights Bill in 1964, because that basically means that whenever you offer a service, if you are offering it, you have to offer it equally. You cannot decide, well, I'm going to give you this, and I'm going to give someone else something different that I'm listing it as the exact same thing. That's what was at question back then, because restaurants would have segregated services. Public services would have segregated services. There'd be different bathrooms, different water fountains, different places to eat. White people couldn't be eating with black people. They were given separate but equal, quote unquote, as in everything was different under the pretense that it was supposed to be equal, which is not. Now everything has to be equal in the sense that whether or not you're black and white, you can sit wherever you want in a restaurant or on a bus. That does not mean that you individually cannot you can still have your service denied. If you go to like any gas station anywhere, they will usually have a sign on it saying, we have the right to refuse your service if, they think you're sketchy, if they think you're going to do something bad or illegal, possibly damage.
Does the business have that right even without putting the sign up?
Yes, technically, although I do believe if any business is going to discriminate against someone, in this particular case especially, if you're not going to serve gay people, then you need to be upfront about this. It has to be crystal clear, so that way you waste no one's time, because that's just rude and inconsiderate.
Well, in this case, though, it wasn't like he wasn't serving gay people, so unless you want him, like, he just wasn't going to make a custom cake for the people that he didn't believe in. I mean, he in the past, he refused to make a custom Halloween cake, because it went against his religion. I mean, I don't think, at least in this case, there was nothing he could have specified where would have that was going to make a custom cake specifically for gay people. I mean, he offered to sell them his normal cakes, just not a custom one.
Yeah.
There possibly could have been something to specify. Obviously, it's not under our discussion to sort of narrow down what exactly this man needed to do, but there was probably something.
Yeah, it would be courtesy, but not legality to put an announcement up, right?
Yeah, I mean, certainly you can make that legal, but that would just be stupid.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, sometimes whenever people talk about freedom of religion, one of the main things you think about that is, oh, I have the right to, go to whatever church I want and worship whatever God and whatever practices I want without someone telling me, no, I can't do that. But that also goes to say religious freedom gives me freedom, and I have the right to not do something that someone wants me to do. So that is clearly demonstrated with he doesn't want to do that. And a lot of people, on Twitter and stuff post a picture of a cake with a swastika on it. It says like "Hail Hitler," and they're like, would you want to make that? Which I think is kind of a straw man, potentially, just because obviously it's Hitler, so obviously no one would want to do that. But I do think it kind of illustrates an interesting point of you wouldn't want to make that cake, so why should this guy have to? You're basically telling the Christian baker what is okay to believe and what isn't, which I feel like clearly infringes on religion.
Yeah, I mean, if we're just gonna talk about this for a brief moment more, if we're not going to talk about it on an individual basis, if you think about Chick-fil-A, they don't have service on Sundays. You can't go to a Chick-fil-A on a Sunday.
Yeah.
Yes, and they base upon their religion, although they could base that practice upon anything they'd want to. If they wanted to be closed on Tuesdays, they could. So it just, you have to imagine how far this could potentially go if people didn't think that we all have a right to choose, so to speak. We all have our individual rights to choose how we want to run our business.
Right. And I do think if it becomes such a major issue, as in if a certain business didn't want to serve, black people just because that's an easy, obviously discriminatory example, I do think also the free market would help that if the business was clearly not serving black people, then I would not want to go to that business. I know plenty of people that want to go to that business, and you could take use of that in starting your own business that serves.
Well, yeah, think about it. If tomorrow Wendy's said we're no longer serving all black people in across the world,
yeah,
imagine the uproar.
Everyone would go to McDonald's, and everyone would go to all the other places.
They'd be out of business in a month.
Black. Yeah, exactly.
Like,
so it kind of takes care of itself without creating these stupid rules that tell people what they aren't allowed to do. And if they imagine if it was the baker was really severe and he wouldn't serve gay people in general, this is just hypothetical, he wouldn't give them a cake, they wouldn't do anything. If you even said you supported gay people, he wouldn't serve you, and it just got super extreme. Just like Wendy's, he would be out of business if people actually cared. So I just think it takes care of itself. Anyway, moving on to the next thing, we're going to talk about Medicare's running out of money. Jeremy, I'll let you introduce this one. I'll bring the topic up on the screen, or the article, and you can kind of just explain it.
Yeah, so right now, projections just came out. The U.S. government gave projections on two of the biggest social services that we have, Medicare and Social Security. Medicare right now, if projections are correct and if everything stays on the same line, by 2026, there will not be any money left. The program will be insolvent, meaning that they're going to have to.
How does that happen? Like, how do they run out of money?
Well, we know that the U.S. government is in an extreme debt right now. Not just a deficit, we're running at a loss. We've been running at a loss for years now, and a massive loss at that. So
they're spending more money than our tax dollars generate.
And that means we start taking out of the private accounts for Medicare and Social Security. How those programs work is that you, as an individual, put the money into these accounts that apparently the U.S. government isn't supposed to touch, so that way you can use them when you get old. Medicare being for health costs whenever you're old, because usually those are plentiful, and Social Security being just for you to pay for anything else, food and whatnot.
Taken out of everyone's taxes.
Yes, that's taken out of everyone's taxes. You cannot consent out of that, except for, I think, if you run your own business and you have no employees, like you're self-employed. Right. As like a contractor.
So are you able to tell me, because I actually I'm not too familiar, what made it insolvent, as in insolvent, them not being able to pay back anything, like not being able to keep up with it? Like what changed? Just too much debt? And what?
Well, not only has our debt situation caused this, but demographic wise, right now, as we know, the baby boomer generation is reaching the age of retirement. And that is creating a massive deficit at the top, whereas we don't have a lot of young people right now. The millennial generation is a lot smaller than the baby boomer generation is. So there's not enough money to keep everything in balance.
Gotcha.
Which is why Medicare by 2026 will be insolvent, and then Social Security by 2034 will be insolvent, and then they're going to have to cut benefits drastically by 21% to be able to keep running these programs.
Or hike up the taxes to put more money into it, right?
Yeah, which means they'd have to hike up the individual Medicare and Social Security tax rates, which would hit everyone, and it would not be a small amount either.
Do you agree? Do you think Social Security is a good thing or no?
Well,
or what would be your proposed best system for retirement?
Honestly, I have a lot of thoughts about this, but I think Tyler, being a very big proponent of capitalism
well, he also works for retirement.
Yeah, I think he'd have a wonderful.
It's insurance. I don't know if I'd call it retirement.
Well,
it's just insurance, but isn't it life insurance too? I guess.
Generally life insurance. I mean, obviously we do other things, but.
Well, anyways,
yes.
What's your opinion, Tyler, on Social Security and Medicare?
What would be your best solution? Not to fix it, but for retirement.
I mean, do you want the libertarian solution, or do you just want like a solution that would?
Like, what do you believe? Do you think we should replace it? Do you think we should get rid of it? Do you think that we should have a multitude of different solutions? What?
Okay, pragmatically speaking, I do recognize the fact that there are people in the world who, while making a steady income, would not be smart, and they would not save it, and they would not have plans, or there would be something that would occur in their lives that would result in them not having enough, and that's like the whole concept of a social safety net. And I'm generally not a big fan of social safety nets, but pragmatically speaking, I do see where they come into play, right? Where, if, for example, there was no Social Security and we got up to retiring, 10% of them didn't save anything. So now they're a detriment to the rest of society. And there's either we can now tax people more to help those people, or we can let them die in the streets, or we can let them live in poverty, and poverty generally leads to like more crime. And so again, pragmatically speaking, I can see why there'd be the necessity for a program like that. Idealistically speaking, I think it should be people's own responsibility to have to handle that stuff. And I also don't think, again, idealistically, I don't think you should be able to take money from future generations and say, yeah, that's not that work that you had to earn that money is no longer yours, and we're going to go ahead and give it to the past generations who, again, weren't responsible enough to save. So again,
people would save money if there was no safety net.
I think a lot of people would, but I also think there are plenty of people who wouldn't.
And would they just straight up die?
I don't know. That's the thing, is I don't know. I don't know if they'd get help from family. It would be in a case by case basis. There would probably be at least some of them who would either die or would have to rely on charity, which I think is okay. I think charities would also get more money if Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid went away. So I don't know. It's honestly quite hard to say, and that's kind of one of the problems with like how far down the rabbit hole we are with trillions of dollars in debt and like so much expectation upon the future, is that it's just I don't know. The only good thing, or I guess I shouldn't call this a good thing. The only not as bad thing is that our millennial generation, the ratio of boomers to millennials is actually smaller than a lot of other developed countries, because for some reason, like Japan or like Germany and a lot of those other nations, for some reason they just stopped having a lot of kids during the millennial generation, even more significantly than we did. So if I'm not mistaken, they're probably going to have a slightly bigger problem than we are in regards to this. Yeah, which is, again,
why does that make it less of a problem if there's more of us?
Well, that's why I said you can't call it good, but less bad for America. Oh wait, what were you saying? I'm sorry.
Like why is it less bad? Because there's more money, because there's more kids?
Yes.
If there's more kids, then there's more money to pay for the old people. Yeah, sorry, I didn't know what you were saying.
Sorry, yeah. I was just making sure. Okay.
Yeah.
It's too late now to get rid of it, pragmatically, like you said.
Yeah. The biggest problem is now you have people who are in their 50s who are expecting to retire in a few years, and you've already taken money out of their paycheck their entire lives. You would have riots, legitimately. Yeah, if somebody tomorrow, like if Paul Ryan tomorrow just said, buy Social Security, that would not be a good thing. There would be massive public uprising.
Even if it becomes insolvent in 2026, that still doesn't really mean it's not functional, right? It can still function. It just
there's not enough money to pay for the benefits that everyone were promised while they were growing up and paying into the system. So that is a pretty big issue, and I feel like people would be very upset about that.
Yes, people will be when the time comes, because they will be getting less of what they were promised. They'll be getting less benefits.
It's a faulty system. Well, I feel like it wasn't a bad system when it was first proposed, but what it should be is the money I pay into Social Security now, I get that money later in life instead of giving it to today's older generation. Because why we're behind, I think, is because the first generation, whenever Social Security was introduced, hadn't paid into it. So they took the money from the younger generation, and now we're one generation behind.
Well, okay,
I feel like a solution would be a generation kind of taking a hit and saying we're not going to take any Social Security. Obviously, that won't happen. But
yeah, this is one of those FDR programs that everyone was like, yeah, this is actually a really good idea, and it's not a bad idea, but it like many government programs is implemented so poorly that
generation behind.
It's subject to this kind of sway. Whereas if a generation is much larger than another, you get this issue.
Yeah.
So that also raises another thing that's really, really good, because Generation Z is bigger than the baby boomer generation. So we'll actually be running at a positive income for those programs soon, but not very soon, because Generation Z is just getting into college. So it still has another decade before they're making real money.
Yeah, I mean, the whole general economic growth that we've been seeing is also useful, just because that results in more money for the government.
Which is useful, I guess, but
yeah. I mean, I wrote that one. Yeah, I wrote that one article a very long time ago about the whole concept behind global warming, where even if it was real, the amount of discretionary spending, or possibly future discretionary spending in like 2070 that we would lose from the amount of regulations we were planning on putting on ourselves would be ridiculous. And before we even got to the point where even the worst predictions of global warming start saying anything super disastrous, like I said, that at least in my personal opinion, if we had those cutbacks, there would already be riots in the streets due to the generational issue. People benefit. I wrote about that like a year and a half ago now. So
no, it was like a year ago.
Okay. Yeah,
that was a long time ago.
I remember reading that.
I think we talked about it.
I liked that article.
Wait, it was a secondary take on the Paris Climate Agreement, right?
I think that's what it was. Yeah.
I'll just bring it up.
Yeah, I think we actually talked about it like in one of the first podcasts too.
I think so. Those are the days.
That was Yeah, July 10th last year. So almost
Ooh.
a year.
Oh, only a year. Wow, I thought it was more than that.
Yeah, here's the. Yeah, these are pretty interesting, actually.
Yeah, so this is more insight. You guys can go to this article on sensicalpolitics.com as Secretary take on the Paris Climate Agreement to get more insight
It's really
into the topic that we're
interesting.
talking about.
There's some
Because it's
good
really
stats.
interesting.
And it's from 538, which does. I trust them. They're pretty good.
Well, they even have the actual source, which is U.S. Census Bureau statistics, which
Yeah.
kind of can't be wrong.
Yeah. And,
Well,
I wouldn't say they can't be wrong, but
Yeah, they could be tampered with, but
can't really get a better, more
Yeah.
reliable one.
anyways,
Anyway, so I guess we'll just have to see. At least, I mean, like Tyler said, this isn't really a good thing, but at least the insolvency issue isn't whenever us three are retiring. It'll be before.
I didn't say that.
No. I'm saying I agree with you in the sense of maybe this isn't really a good thing, but
we will be retiring. We'll be turning into robots.
Yeah.
I can't wait. AI uploaded to the internet.
Oh yeah.
All right. Well, anyway, the next thing. Trump was babbling today about, and so was his lawyer. Rudy Giuliani was asked whether Trump could constitutionally pardon himself. And I mean, it was kind of on the spot question, and Rudy Giuliani essentially said he didn't really give a distinctive answer. He basically just said, that's an interesting question. I assume he did because the Constitution says that the president can pardon anyone aside from impeachment, and I'm assuming anyone includes himself. But I also don't understand why Trump would even discuss about this or kind of brag about it, because he's innocent, as he claims. So why would you need a pardon if you're innocent? It's foolish things, I feel like. Here, I'll bring up the article from CNN.
CNN.
Well, isn't there technically a difference between Isn't there a difference between the whole prosecution process and the process of impeachment / pardoning?
Well, yeah. I mean, you can't pardon yourself from impeachment, but he can pardon himself from like what's going on right now, like sort of investigations or whatnot.
But you have committed a crime to be pardoned.
Yes.
Which I feel like is kind of where Hillary Clinton kind of messed herself because of Barack Obama. Not that he would have, but he didn't even have the option to pardon her because she was innocent. So now you can't pardon anything if they haven't done anything. Is how I think it goes. You can't give someone.
Yeah, basically, how this take goes is that if Trump were to pardon himself, that is almost an admission of guilt.
Yeah.
I've heard that, yeah.
But even if it is, he's pardoned, so it doesn't matter, right?
It won't matter, but nobody will trust him, and he will certainly not get reelected. Because that is the shadiest thing ever.
Yeah.
Yeah, the thing that I heard from his base was that pardoning himself just to mainly like stop a large part of the investigation. But you know. But then that was kind of the reason why I brought up the point of the difference between the prosecution and the impeachment, where even if that pardoning did happen, if it did sort of imply his guilt strongly, and there was some sort of evidence that in concurrence with the impeachment resulted in agreement with the prosecution could result in an impeachment. Yeah. So
can you imagine though if he did impeach himself, the CNN newsroom? Can you imagine the headline?
You mean pardoning or impeach?
Sorry, pardoned himself. It would be so.
Yeah, that would be an interesting panel.
Yeah.
But, yeah, that would be absolutely crazy.
Anything else to add to that, or?
It's not something that he's going to do. I'm certain of it because he would be so deep in the crap. Using words lightly here, he would not be able to dig himself out of the dirt pile that he would have put himself rightly in by pardoning himself. It would not go very well in the lightest terms.
Yeah.
So it's not going to happen.
Well, we'll move on to the next thing then, which is we're just kind of talking. This last segment is just kind of talking about things going on in the White House. So we'll just briefly talk about him visiting the White House and by Kim, I don't mean Kim Jong-un, I mean Kim Kardashian for some reason, visit the White House to advance
Advocate
prison advocate
for prison and like prison reform. Yeah.
Right. She has, I believe, a grandmother that's in prison for drug offense, as I feel like everyone has a grandma in prison.
Yeah.
Knows someone in prison for drug offense. But I agree with Kim Kardashian basically on this, or at least if she was, I didn't read too much into it. Probably not the best to be talking about this, admitting that. But if she was advocating for less strict sentences or even legality of drug offenses, as in marijuana, then I would agree with her. But I also disagree with everyone praising Donald Trump for hosting her whenever she's a celebrity, and we would make fun of Barack Obama and every other president that it's just, I don't like treating a celebrity like they know any more than anyone else just because they're a celebrity. It's not like Kim Kardashian is an expert on constitutionality of prisons or anything like that. So why do we waste our tax dollars to bring her in to talk with Trump? And Trump even would make fun of Barack Obama for having celebrities into the White House, and then he goes and does the same thing. It's kind of, frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, if we just want to take something good out of this small section, it's that drug reform is something that definitely needs to happen, because it's not indicative of a free society if you're going to be imprisoned based upon substance abuse. It doesn't really make any sense. If you're going to ruin your own life, then that's sort of your own decision. And if you're just going to smoke pot, then I mean, whatever.
Well, would you say it's good for Kim Kardashian to go into the White House? Do you think it was good or bad that she went in?
Well, she wants to speak her mind, and that's the right of every citizen. And I think this should happen with every normal citizen. You should just be able to go to the White House, like Ronald Reagan said in one of his speech. You should be able to, as a regular citizen, go to the White House, go to Donald Trump's desk, and be like, I want this change.
Do you actually mean that, or you just mean that in a hypothetical?
No, I mean, like, you should be able to direct your complaints directly to the president, even though he probably can't do much about it. You should be able to do that, and likewise with every senator for your state and every congressman, because I think that's a hallmark of a free society.
Yeah, that's interesting. Tyler, good or bad?
I just think Trump was trying to pull another Stormy Daniels with Kim Kardashian.
Oh my
god. This section is canceled, this segment.
Well, and breaking as in this morning, breaking news, Trump calls off the Philadelphia Eagles' visit to the White House. It's been a thing since, I think, Ronald Reagan as well, to the White House kind of hosts the Super Bowl winners for the year, which I guess is kind of cool. It's kind of unity. The Super Bowl's patriotic and everything. But I also don't really like, our government that's there to do a certain job, kind of hosting athletes. It kind of seems, I don't know what you call it, but it just seems like not their job to do that. But either way, it's kind of fine. But essentially, Trump has said before that him calling out athletes for not kneeling for the national anthem is a winning issue for him, which I believe it's a winning issue for his base. I don't know if it's a winning issue for uniting the country, but if I was Trump and I was trying to, keep my approval rating up, I'd please my base too. So I guess he's doing the right thing in that sense. But he essentially said that the Philadelphia Eagles aren't allowed to come to the White House anymore, or aren't invited to the White House anymore because of their stances to kneeling for the national anthem. And he cites that the Philadelphia Eagles knelt for the national anthem in previous games, which isn't true. None of the Philadelphia Eagles ever knelt for the national anthem. And then Fox News even goes on last night and cites pictures of Eagles players kneeling on the field, which they were clearly took out of context of the Eagles players praying before the game, before the national anthem even started. and I just want to bring up I'll bring it up in a second. But one of the Philadelphia Eagles players tweeted that it's completely wrong for Fox News and Trump to kind of make up fake things to back them, because it's true that none of the Eagles players ever knelt, and they're kind of using this propaganda to ignite his base. And
yeah, it's just such a silly thing. It's really essentially propaganda at this point, because he's fabricated evidence of them doing this, and then he just disinvited them. It also doesn't make much sense, because this is just a sports event. The United States government has for years hosted professional and collegiate sports winners of tournaments. Like the NCAA basketball champion might go to the White House, because it's a patriotic event. It's an event for unity. That's the same reason why we have the Olympics, because all countries want to have something to rally behind, and so we have the Olympics so that way we can showcase our best athletes. So I don't see anything wrong with the United States government hosting sports teams, but if they're going to do it, they should do it, and not play this weird game where we're going to fabricate evidence against the team, and disinvite them based upon that.
Right. Here's the Eagles player. Fox News has retracted the stance, which I guess is good. That's why the tweet's deleted, though. But it was essentially a picture of Zach Ertz and his teammates kneeling on the field, which Fox News said they were doing during the national anthem, which obviously, if you look at them in context, wasn't true. They were praying before the game. But he says this can't be serious. They're basically being used for propaganda. It's just sad. I just feel like you guys should have been better than this, which I completely agree. Trump hasn't apologized. I feel like he kind of realized he shot himself in the foot by disinviting them, and then realizing none of them ever knelt, which is kind of rare, because almost everyone on every team in the NFL had at least one or two people kneeling, and the Eagles didn't, so it would have been fine. I mean, obviously, some people on the Eagles said they weren't going to go to the White House, but Trump should have just said, I mean, that's on them. I still want to have the people that want to come, because it's cool to go to the White House. But anyway, that's just a lot of shenanigans in the White House going on.
Yep, as usual.
Yeah. Do you guys have anything else to add?
Tyler?
No, not much. It's always interesting how every week Trump manages to do something that's both good and something that's both bad.
Yeah, I like asking people this too. I'll go Tyler first. If election for 2020 was right now, would Trump win re-election or no?
Yes.
Yes, he would win.
Yes, he would win.
Jeremy?
Yeah, I believe so too. I think that right now the even split between Democrats and Republicans right now, with like projections for the 2018 midterm election, is good enough to say that Trump has a good chance of winning. Of course, it falls upon his opponent, surely, depending on who they are. If they were like Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren, I'm almost positive. I'm almost positive Trump would win that election. So
I think Bernie Sanders is gonna run again, or he wants to at least.
He's gonna walk because he ain't doing so good.
He's not gonna run. All right. Well, if you guys have nothing else to add, then I think we'll call it a night.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thanks for listening or watching, I guess. And we'll talk to you guys later.